Hi, Stuart Talley here to do another update on the ongoing Pinnacle metal-on-metal hip trial. Today I wanted to talk about the testimony of Leanne Turner. She is a witness who was called by DePuy to testify, and she's an engineer who works for DePuy and was heavily involved in the development of all of the metal-on-metal hips that DePuy put out. All the way back in 1995 is when the process started. On direct examination, she described sort of the history of the development of the Pinnacle hip, discussed in detail all of the testing that was done on the hip before it was released to the public. The intent from the defense attorney was to sort of counter the argument that the plaintiffs were making that this was a product that was rushed to the market. There was a lot of discussion about all of the different types of testing that was done on the device. And it was a very sort of long, detailed history that was given. On cross-examination, there was significant discussion of the information that DePuy provided to the FDA about this device, and specifically it had to do with what they call clearance. Clearance is a specification in these metal-on-metal hip cases where it basically describes the difference in size of the ball and the cup. So you have to think you have a ball and you have a cup, and if they're the exact same size, you're going to have no clearance. So the ball has to be slightly smaller than the cup. And they have done these studies that show that if you have too much clearance, okay, you end up with lots of wear debris. So you have to tightly control the clearance when you manufacture these devices. And so on cross-examination, Ms. Turner admitted that DePuy had given incorrect information to the FDA about the clearance on the Pinnacle metal-on-metal hip, that the information that was given showed a smaller clearance than what was actually submitted, and the smaller clearance would indicate less wear versus more wear. Ms. Turner testified that it was a mistake. It was an insignificant mistake and didn't matter, and there was several documents that were presented to her that showed that it was probably more than just an insignificant mistake. The FDA found out about the mistake in 2005, so 5 years later, when DePuy tried to get approval to sell another metal-on-metal hip called the ASR. And in their submission, they said the ASR is just like the Pinnacle. And they cited what the clearance was, the actual clearance on both hips. And the FDA came back and said, whoa, wait a minute. We thought the clearance was something different because of what you submitted back in 2000 on the Pinnacle. And so the FDA sort of caught them on this error or mistake, or however you want to describe it. The plaintiffs would describe it as a blatant lie to the FDA to get this product approved. There was also discussion about how the original design of the hip had less clearance, and that they decided to change the clearance the week before they submitted the application to the FDA to get approval. There was testimony that this decision to change the clearance was made only by the engineers. It wasn't approved or run by the design surgeons who were involved in developing the hip, and it was sort of a last-second change that was made. Again, I think the theme that the plaintiffs have in this case is that they were rushing this to the market. With respect to the testing of the device, there was testimony about the types of tests that were run. And so what the plaintiffs did on cross-examination was got Ms. Turner to admit that many of the tests that were run involved not the actual Pinnacle metal-on-metal hip that was released to the public, but precursor designs, different hips with different clearance. And so a lot of the data that was provided to the FDA about how well this hip had performed in these simulation tests was data involving different designs, not the actual Pinnacle. There was also discussion about a clinical trial that was done. During the direct examination of Ms. Turner, she talked about a test that was done before 2000 where they were actually putting the metal on metal hips in certain patients and monitoring those patients. They call it an IDE, or an investigational device exemption. And so they were doing this study where they were following patients. And she indicated that this was sort of a legitimate clinical study. On cross-examination, she admitted that the study was shut down after only 2 years. And so the ability of this study to actually determine the biological impact of cobalt and chromium ions on tissue was very limited, because most of the time the problems develop well after 2 years. So there was never any effort in that study to follow up patients. So they never went back and looked at the same patients 10 years later or 15 years later to see how they did. The cross-examination, I think, of Ms. Turner has gone very well. The plaintiffs are, I think, reinforcing their theme that this product was rushed to the market, that there was limited testing done, that the testing that was done involved different designs, that nobody ever really looked at what the cobalt and chromium ions would do to people as far as systemic problems, as well as problems with tissue destruction and bone destruction. That was never really examined before this product hit the market. Stay tuned. We'll try to provide more updates. It's difficult because we have a lot going on around here. So we try to provide these updates as often as we can. We're at the point now in the trial where plaintiffs are testifying about their injuries. There's a lot of testimony from doctors and surgeons who treated patients. A lot of it is very specific to each plaintiff. We probably will not be providing updates on that specific testimony. We're going to really try to stick to the more general stuff that really impacts every case. So if you have a Pinnacle hip and you have any questions about the case or how it's going, you can give us a call at the phone number on the screen, or you can visit our website and fill out one of our online forms, and we'll call you right back.